So when it comes to backpacking, the biggest concern for people is carrying all that weight. And you can certainly reduce the weight that you're going to have to carry on any backpacking trip by, spending lots of money on really light gear. And there certainly are items that you can be cost effective about by kind of saving some weight on certain items or investing in certain items that might weigh a little bit more than others. But one of the things you can also do is just pack smart. Now there's 3 things that I'm thinking about when I'm packing my bag. And the first one is just trying to make sure that I'm carrying the weight properly on my back. So where I position things inside my pack is going to make a huge difference. The second is waterproofing. And waterproofing is very important. Trying to keep certain things dry, trying to keep those really sacred things definitely dry is going to be key out there. And then the third thing is access. Making sure that you have items that you're going to need throughout the day or at that very first moment when you get to camp. Things that are very important you're going to want to have in certain spots within your backpack that you can get access to them when you need to. And that might be convenience, and that might be because of an emergency as well. So the very first thing that I do before I start packing my bag is I actually line it with a garbage bag. Now there's a lot of different types of garbage bags out there, but what you want to do is go for a contractor's bag. A contractor's bag, as opposed to just a regular heavy-duty garbage bag, is going to be really thick plastic. And so it's not going to rip, it's not going to tear. And what I want to do is line my bag with that. So I'm going to take my backpack and I'm going to shove that garbage bag down into the backpack. Now, once I've done that, I can start filling the backpack with the items. And the very first thing that I want to start with is my sleeping bag. Now, you should never store your sleeping bag inside of one of those stuff sacks. You want to make sure that you use a nice big bag to store your sleeping bag, especially when it's down. This will allow it to kind of stretch out and relax, and you're not going to put any strain on those seams. So when I actually pack my sleeping bag for the trip, what I'm going to do here is a couple things. Before I actually stuff it into that stuff sack, the first thing that I'm going to actually do is take the socks that I plan to sleep in, and I'm actually going to put those inside of the sleeping bag. And I'm going to put them all the way down into the bottom of that sleeping bag. I refer to those as my sacred socks. And no matter how long my trip is, whether it's a 1-night or a 6-night trip or even longer, those socks are going to stay inside my sleeping bag, and they're going to stay dry the entire trip. If I can keep my sleeping bag dry, I can keep those socks dry. So every night when I crawl into my sleeping bag, I'm going to take off my wet socks, the socks that I was hiking in all day, and I'm going to put on those dry socks. And it's very important to have dry socks on when you go to bed. And then when I get up in the morning, I simply take those socks off, I leave them inside my sleeping bag, and then I can put on my other socks or another pair of socks to go hiking that day. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my stuff sack for my sleeping bag, and I'm actually going to line that with a garbage bag as well. I'm trying to create redundancies. So in case one waterproof layer fails, I've got another layer that I can rely on. Now that I've got my sleeping bag all packed up and nice and cinched, the next thing I'm going to do is drop that down into my backpack with my garbage bag liner. Now there's a couple of reasons why the sleeping bag goes at the very bottom of the pack. The first is when you're wearing your pack, you want something nice and soft just above your hips. The other reason is at any point during the trip, if you need to sit down, you take off your pack, you can sit on that bottom part of the pack and know that you're not crushing anything important. It's just your sleeping bag at the very bottom. So it gives you a nice seat that you can use throughout the trip. Okay, so now that we have our sleeping bag packed, the next thing to do is start to fill the rest of the bag. And what we want to think about here is what is heavy and what is light. And what we want to try to do is stack the heaviest items right above that sleeping bag that's going to be at the very bottom. So this is my rudimentary diagram of a backpack. Here's the straps. Here's the part that's going to go up against your back. Here's the front of the bag right there. There's our sleeping bag right down there at the very bottom. The next thing that we want to do is put really heavy items on top of that sleeping bag. And then from there, we're going to continue with heavier items all the way up along the back. So when we're thinking about heavy items, we're thinking about things like camp stove, food's gonna be a heavy item as well. So those are things that we're gonna put right at the very bottom and right up against the back. I kind of call this the letter L of heavy items. And then at the very front, right here, this is where we're gonna put really light types of things. So stuff that would go there would be an air mattress would be a great example. Clothing as well. I've got a stuffed sack full of clothes really light. That's gonna go along the very front there. So all of our stuff's gonna weigh the same, but where we put it in the pack is gonna change how that weight feels or how that weight sits on our back. The more we can keep that heavy stuff, that weight up against our back or really low on the pack's gonna be a lot easier for us to carry. So now that I've got my pack filled with all of that stuff that I want inside, the next thing that I'm gonna do is seal off that garbage bag. And so now I've essentially created division within my pack. I've got this section of my pack that is going to be really waterproof. It's inside that garbage bag. And now above that, I can start placing some other items. And these are items that I'm gonna wanna have access to. So things that come to mind for the top are things like a first aid kit, which I've also waterproofed in a separate bag as well. So it doesn't need to go into that garbage bag liner. A tarp, throughout the day you might want to pull out a tarp in case of an emergency, or it might be the very first thing that you want to set up when you get to camp. Along with that is going to be your rope. Things like rain gear, there's my rain pants, rain coat. Okay, so the next thing to pack is that top compartment of your backpack. I like to refer to this thing as the brain because it sits on top of the pack. And this is where you're going to want to keep a few items. Now I kind of divide the things that I want to keep in this part of my pack into a few different categories. I have kind of repair items, things that I'm going to use to fix anything that goes wrong, any items that break when I'm out there. I've got emergency items that I want. I've got things like fire starter, that type of thing, communication. And then the other one is self-care. So things that I'm going to need throughout the day to just take care of myself. And so, the big one there is lunch. Your lunch bag or your lunch is going to be in that top compartment there. I have my fire starting equipment, so a lighter, some wet fire, a candle, all that to kind of help me start a fire out there. I've got various repair items, so down to the most basic is just some duct tape, some zip ties and a Ziploc bag here, as well as these Wale ski straps, a multi-tool. I've got items like my sunglasses, bug spray, hand sanitizer, blister kit, so I've got some moleskin, some donuts, nail clippers as well, lip balm, toilet paper, some pristine drops or something that I use for water purification, my headlamp, my very important charcuterie board, as well as cheese knife. And then I've got this little bag which has a couple of items in it, including some battery packs, some charging cables, and a solar panel as well. And the big reason for that, I can keep my cell phone charged if I need to, but my inReach device is the other item. And I want to keep this in a pocket that's going to be very accessible. And I want to let everybody know in my group where I keep my inReach or my spot device or my emergency beacon device. Now, the other thing that I do here is all of these items I put into various Ziploc bags. So I'm going to have that extra waterproof layer on this by just simply putting everything into a bag on its own. There we go. Now that I've got that, I can start cinching up the side straps to my pack. Now this is where I'm going to kind of get everything nice and stable inside. So you want to cinch those up nice and strong. That way nothing shifts around inside your pack. And then the last thing to discuss is whether or not to strap things to the outside of your pack. And this is a bit of a debated topic, because some people will say that you shouldn't have anything strapped to the outside of your pack, and some people will say that, you know, certain items could be strapped to the outside. The big one for me is tent poles. And so ideally what I'd prefer to do is have this slid down the inside of my pack, and I will keep it on the outside of that rain cover. But if for whatever reason you don't have the space in your pack, what you could do is strap it to the outside. If you're gonna do that, the thing that I recommend is make sure that you actually tie it down or clip it into place. So I'm gonna take that little drawstring and I'm actually going to loop it through this strap. So that way, if this thing were to slide out, it's still attached right here. What you don't want to have happen is something slide out of a strap or strap to the outside of your pack and to lose it. And the other big thing that I will keep on the outside of my pack is my snow shovel if I'm winter camping as well. And depending on the pack, you're going to have lots of little kind of hooks and loops. You know, some packs are going to have ice axe loops that allow you to do this really easily. So there you go. A properly packed bag is really going to help you out there. So take your time while you're doing it. Don't rush. And if you have to unpack and repack a few times to get it right, don't hesitate. Now, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, like the video, and stay safe out there. Make good choices.